Good morning, everyone. This is Greg Aden. Thank you for being with me again on my Servant Leadership Podcast. And today I have a gentleman that I believe everybody who is listening to who they really are is going to enjoy. We're going to talk about Dr. Mitch Harden's why. And if you think about it, and I'd like for you to tell us what you think about this, Dr. Mitch, why don't we, pardon the pun, why don't we focus on our why more often? And we get stuck in the who and the how and the where. And just tell me your why and help me understand why your why is so important.
So, for me personally, my why kind of evolved over time, and my why kind of evolved over me not feeling exactly fulfilled in what I thought I was setting out to do in my life, and so the why of writing books and documenting stories and helping people understand kind of their chemistry and the neurology and why they behave and act and do certain things, but more importantly, that's what all my why ended up becoming. Is I decided that I have a vast amount of experience in human behavior. It became my passion 27, 28 years ago. And I wanted to understand why there was so much suffering and why so many people just seemed to be blah or down or couldn't move forward and whatever it is that was affecting their life. And I thought, you know what, this is something that I get passionate about, helping people end a little bit of suffering. And then I actually turned crazy on it. Then I was like, I'm going to learn every in and out of every single thing. And then I took it a step further. I was like, not only am I going to learn about it, now I'm going to find examples. And I'm going to find examples so that somebody doesn't have to just hear it from me. They can hear it from other people who have actually done it. So, for an example, if I'm talking about leadership, let's say, I would bring you on my show. I did bring you on my show. All right. When we talked about leadership, right? So I'm going to get the guy that's got the most experience or the woman who's got the most experience. And then we're going to kind of break it down from there so that that person has the highest odds of success by really understanding the chemistry, the neurology, the understanding of why. And then I'm going to prove it to you through other people who've already done it.
Beautiful. Well, it's interesting. Simon Sinek has made the word why very, very popular in a way of where do you really focus? And I actually just had a conversation with a gentleman who came over this morning to help us with our air conditioner, and he was talking about John Maxwell and Brene Brown and I mentioned Simon Sinek. He said, I love it. And I said, well, what's so important about what he says? Because, well, he starts with what's important. And that's the why. Why do we do anything? Why do we have the relationships we have? And if you ask me anything about leadership and the why, to me, it always will come down to our relationships. How we language, how we communicate, how we behave, all of that is a choice. Every single day, we get to choose who we are going to be today and who you're going to be for everyone else. You can't be good for anyone else unless you're taking care of yourself first. So you mentioned neurology and the science behind it. Help me understand, help the listeners understand why we don't focus on the things that can really make a difference in our own lives more often.
It's really understanding who and what you are. And then it becomes more about how do you want everyone else to show up around you, and then how do you want to show up for them? And people use that term all the time, and I was confused by it. I'm like, what does that even mean? Well, a lot of it is truly understanding the other person, right? Where they're coming from, what they're doing, and then how do you then navigate your own chemistry and your own thought process in order to either have a good relationship or an exceptional relationship. And I love what you just said before. Everything in life is a relationship, period.
You mentioned, without saying it, one of my favorite words, and I give my loving wife all the credit in the world, empathy. And I want you to, as clearly as you possibly can, Dr. Mitch, because I believe this is where relationships fail. I believe this is where people fail in general because they're so wrapped up in not your why, but a selfish I, and they stop wondering, how can I truly serve another human being? Because I don't believe a lot of people know how. We'll get back to that. But they don't seem to care where the other person is coming from. And empathy, in a definition, is understanding where the other person is coming from, which in my humble opinion, as a leadership consultant, it requires you to stop thinking about you and actually seeing the other person in front of you. And for the love of you know who, care about the person in front of you and say, hey, where are you coming from? Let me understand what your thinking is. And if we could just slow down and have more empathy, please tell me, Dr. Mitch, what do you think our relationships would be like? What do you think the workplaces would be like? What do you think our road rage would be like? You know where I'm going with all this, right?
It's emotion versus logic. That's what it is. Emotional chemistry that goes off. Once it's set off, it's a bomb. And it is going to wreak havoc. It's going to have collateral damage. It's going to have everything bad that you can possibly imagine. Logic is very different. The idea behind being logical is where it ends you up, right? We all want to be more successful. We all want to have a better relationship. We all want to have everything good in our life. Rarely are you going to find that emotional with the emotional chemistry. You're going to find it with the logical chemistry, and then the logical chemistry can produce an emotional chemistry. So, I mean, you lose a relative that you absolutely love, and you're really sad, and you're kind of broke down. And matter of fact, we just talked about it off camera. One of the things that gets interesting about that, right, is that if you keep carrying that emotion, then it starts to fade into your being, into your genetic code, if you will. And then you can't move on. You can't do anything. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to not be able to move on or proceed or become as successful as they can possibly become. So then it's that recognition, and it's actually understanding the game. And the reason I bring up Vegas is because I do love craps, and I do like it's a big odds, and there's a lot of variables that goes on, and man, they give you certain little things in there to make that kind of crazy bet that they know you're going to lose. That's how they build $1 billion casinos, right?
Sure.
It's like an entire psychological game on a carpet, right? They give you all these numbers, and you get fans, and they know you're going to get hyped up, and they know you're going to bet heavy and take the big gamble, take the big risk. They keep pushing you to be unsuccessful, even though it's the most successful game in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
That's life. It's the same thing. And you get caught up in that emotion, or you get caught up with losing the ability to step back, be rational, and be logical about something. It really makes a person's life miserable. And that's that thing inside that you talk about why we get so wrapped up in I. It's because we're not really focused on learning about what's outside of the I.
Yeah, beautifully said. And it's funny, Dr. Mitch, when you started to focus on logic versus emotion, my judgment brain went, well, I don't want to be in my head all the time. I want to serve and come from a place of heart. And my emotion comes from, no, it really isn't coming from my heart. I allow myself to get emotional. Therefore, I do get flipped. The brain goes like that. And I can't really think straight. I can't see straight. I can't be kind. I certainly can't be gentle with someone in front of me. And you mentioned, losing a relative. I don't think it's any secret to anyone who's listening that I did lose a son last May, and I didn't curl up in a little ball. I understood to the best of my ability why anyone that age would want to take his life, and I tried to understand, and I forgave him, but I realized he didn't do anything to me. He did it to himself. He didn't want to be here anymore, and I honestly did try and address the logic behind it. And I wasn't one of the more emotional people. Sure, I'm sad losing my son, no doubt about it. What I also knew, as I told you off camera, is if he were sitting right here on my shoulder, the little Sam, and he would say, Dad, what you do is wonderful. People need more of what you're doing. Keep rocking. He would never ask me to curl up in a little ball and feel sorry for myself and stay emotional and not continue to serve human beings. And I don't know that is addressing why I'm not justifying needing to work. I'm logically saying to myself, this makes sense. If I stop serving people, I'm not fulfilled. Tammy's not fulfilled. That's my wife. And Sam's up there going, Dad, you're not listening. Listen to why you really do what you do. Your why is beautiful. Continue doing it. In having these conversations, Dr. Mitch, is one of the things that is fulfilling for me. because I get to ask really cool questions about from really cool people so other really cool people can understand how they can continue to be wonderful human beings.
That's a lot of what I do. I take if you step back and take it logically, then add emotion to it, you're probably going to be quite okay. But if you start out emotionally and then try and add logic after you're emotionally charged, it's probably not going to be okay. The odds are not in your favor. But one of the things that I think about, and again, this comes back from doing thousands and thousands of these stories, right? Like I've heard this story too many times, unfortunately. But I think about it like this most of the time: that person's in pain. There's it. It's not good. It's not good. And at some point in time, they thought that was the best option for them. Emotionally, I want to say it's not your best option, but logically, I can get inside their head and think, you know what, it might have been. Otherwise, maybe years of suffering, years of misery, years of all this stuff. And sometimes, I don't know. I'm not the futurist, if you will, but it makes sense to me. And then what I can do is I can then emotionally be like, you know what, I love you, man. If that was your best option, then I got to support that best option. And that may sound crazy to a lot of people, and I'm sure it is, especially if you go emotionally first. But logically, what other option is there to think that was the best option in that moment for them? That's their life, not ours.
Yeah, and I would say that what I said earlier stands, and I've never changed my story because I honestly recognize he did not want to be here anymore. Now, do I understand exactly why he didn't want to be here? I could make up three or four different reasons, and it could sound good to me, but it doesn't matter. It wasn't my choice, and he didn't ask my permission. So to those of you that are out there thinking about how you can be a better self, all I can ask you is to reach out and ask for help, make your story more widely recognized, and you may receive the help that you want, and you may not. But please, and I said this yesterday to a group of very intelligent human beings, the thing that leaders suck at most, or the thing that leaders can't do very well, is raise their hand and ask for help, because we all have this: I need to be buttoned up, I need to look like I have everything in order, I need to have all the answers, I can't raise my hand, or wait a minute, I might look weak. No, you might look vulnerable, you might look human, you might look like someone who doesn't have it all buttoned up, and now you're more attractive to the people that you're serving. But we're so arrogant, we're so narcissistic, we have so much ego that we stay up there and we can't see anybody else because all we see is us. And the buttoned up version isn't what everybody is attracted to, frankly.
That's the emotion versus logic, though. So when you're scared to ask for help, it's all the emotional wise. It's the how people are going to perceive me, so on and so forth. But when you do ask why, that's truly a leadership, because that's how you understand what it is that you need to fix. If you don't know the problem, you can't fix it, right? So yeah, that's the logical part. Logical part says, hey, you know what? This is something I don't know. So tell me about it. Let me understand it, study it, and then you become the expert in it.
Let me ask you a question, Dr. Mitch, and I believe I know the answer, but I want our audience to know: why did you start your own show? Why did you want to make sure Truth Talks was something that you love doing, but what's the why of your show?
So it's all based on story. The more stories that you hear, and we tailor it to a successful outcome. And the reason being is I wanted to give you a roadmap, if you will, from the emotional to the logical to the success, right? So we take everything from addiction to you name it, relationships, you name it. We run all these stories. I run stories like Navy SEALs, and I what I'm doing is I'm interjecting all kinds of different things into your psyche so that you now have all these weapons, if you will, to fight the war of the emotion, or fight the war of whatever it is you're going through. So we might run a story about addiction, and in running that addiction story, we run three or four addiction stories. And the reason that I do that is because three or four different avenues they took to find success, to find their outcome. One guy was straight up in your face calling you all kinds of names if you're addicted. Another guy found God. Another guy, it was family support and so on and so forth. And I always want to give people options because not one way always works for every single person. So give them a ton of options. But then I run things that are a little bit differently too. So I'll run a Navy SEAL. And one of the reasons I love Navy SEALs is because they're so mentally strong. Like it's insanely mentally strong. And every time I run a show, producer Chad and I talk about this all the time. Every time we run a show, we grow. We grow. We're running the show and we grow. Can't imagine with somebody that doesn't do it like we do it as often as we do it, the amount of growth that can happen. And I got one guy, we're just sitting there having a conversation, just like you and I did. And he says, you know what, if you focus just on the 6 inches in front of you, you can walk 100 miles.
Yeah.
Now, how does that go into addiction? Well, sometimes you just got to see that 6 inches or that 6 minutes ahead of you. So for the next 6 minutes, I'm not going to take a drug. And then I'm going to do it again for the next 6 minutes. I'm not going to take a drug. You start piling all those 6 minutes together, you made it 24 hours.
Yeah.
But you do the next 6 minutes the rest of those days. We had another story that we did, and I don't even care. I get too excited about this, and I got to tell you guys stories. That's just how it works. But you know what? We had a guy who was saved in prison by a book by another guest that we did, Jerry Coffey. This guy went through hell. That was in the Hanoi Hilton for 9 years and 7 days, and he developed a tap code so he could talk to people. He got beaten, he got berated and all this stuff. And he finally said, started saying, instead of God, why me? What do you want me to learn from this God? Now, how does that translate over into addiction? Well, what if you said that if you're addicted to something? God, why am I addicted to it? What can I do? How can I take my message and help other people? And I've seen it happen a million times. And so you take the guy who's addicted and you start giving him power and saying, hey, talk to all these other people who are addicted. Even if he shoots up right before he talks to him, right? He's still thinking it. And he's thinking, oh, wait, man, if I start helping people, I need to help myself. And that's the why behind this. It's the why behind it.
We learn from stories. We learn from examples. We learn to see our own stuff, our own crap, if you will, through others, not only their struggles, but I also hear you're saying that your show is for stories so other people can have something to be connected to. And if he or she can do that, maybe I can. Or how they did it is new to me. I've tried a lot of different things, says the person who's addicted to something. And addiction isn't only drugs and alcohol or porn. It's habits. It's habits that are not fulfilling our relationships. It's habits that are keeping us from being our best selves. And people think that just because you're addicted to something, it's one of 3 or 4 things. No, it's addictive behavior. And it's putting off people. It's being mean. Yeah, someone who's just nasty all the time, they don't recognize you're addicted to being an asshole. I mean, call it what you want, but no one really wants to be around you when you're like that. But those people really don't care. And unfortunately, unless you believe otherwise, they're going to die a lonely human being.
It's true. I would say 90% of my success has been what you just talked about, and I think it's so important. And I want to reiterate this again. 90% of my success has been me asking for help. Every big name person that I know, 90% of their success is being asking for help, right? So you say, why'd I start my show, or how'd I start this show? Producer Chad and I talk about this all the time. We're going to tell this story one day. We're hanging green screens in my regular office, my chiropractic office. And I'm asking him, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? I didn't know. If I would have said, hey, I want to do this, but have no knowledge of how the game works, it's not going to go anywhere. I ask a million questions like, is this possible? Can we do this? And then it turned into this because we asked those questions. Now, I don't necessarily think it's being vulnerable. I think it's being logical. Like, this is what I don't know. Teach me. Tell me what I got to do, and then we'll figure it out from there. And so many times, I don't know if you do this, but I don't, it's a dirty little secret. I don't always go back and rewatch the shows. And one of the reasons is I don't like the way my voice sounds. I don't like sometimes I think, my God, I'm a hillbilly, and I don't know if that came across the way I wanted it to go, but it never deterred me from doing them.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it. I'm going to trust that he's going to turn it into something good. And I bumble and I stumble and I do all this other stuff, but I kind of like that too. And that's the difference between logic and emotion. If I got emotional, I would be frozen in time because I screw up I screw up every show. I mean, luckily he can cut it out, but I screw up every show. I don't care. I'm out there to get a message out, get the why out, and I figure he'll clean it up and it'll make it look good. And that was my why. And so many people get so frozen with emotion that they never end up fulfilling whatever it is that they dream of doing.
Well, shout out to Chad Jameson. You referred to him as producer Chad, and he produces my show too. Fantastic human being in his own right. You said it's not like you have to be vulnerable. You said, well, you don't have to. We don't have to be vulnerable. And I told this story yesterday when the same group of people is you get to, you get to lead, you get to be who you want to be. You don't have to. You get to. And I looked around when I said that because if you believe being a leader is a burden, stop. No one wants you to lead them if you think it's a pain in your, you know what. Now you may not need to be vulnerable, but here's what I believe, Dr. Mitch, you are always. You're freaking curious. You are insanely curious. You ask great questions on your show. You bring people to open up everything they have in front of you. That is a skill. And I believe empathy and curiosity. And all I want on my tombstone are those two words. He finally pulled his head out of his ass and became empathetic. Thank you, Tammy. I did a lot of work just like you have in your life back in 2014 when I told my big job to go suck it. My relationship with my existing wife at the time, but I was realizing that the reason I'm on this earth isn't me. It's my two kids. And I finally had some purpose. Then I realized, what if I took care of other people and not me all the time? And that's how I became a leadership coach. It's a little known story, but it's so funny when you pull your head out of your, you know what, you can actually see and hear and think differently. But back to you, it's your decision to be super curious and bring the best out of people. All I want to say is thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Your stories are brilliant. And if you haven't tuned in to Truth Talks with Dr. Mitch, please do. I would say that at some point I'm going to join you in putting down my stories into some sort of a manuscript or book or something. But I'm just not there yet. And the reason I'm not there yet is because I have a pretty busy schedule or a full schedule serving other human beings, and I'm creating my own stories, but I'm living their journey because I'm a little part of it. But the only reason I'm a decent coach is because I ask questions and I ask, is this what you want? Yes. Okay. Well, what behaviors are you going to change? Well, I can't, or I won't, or, well, no. Let's go back to what you want. Tell me, tell you, tell anybody important what you want, and we will all help you. And, oh, by the way, I'm going to hold you accountable. Hope your spouse will. I hope your kids will. I hope your team will. But if you say what you want, you then have a better chance of it happening.
Fact.
It's just irrefutable. But if you want to be a you know what, and you'll behave that way, people will label you accordingly, and you'll die a lonely man or lonely person.
It's true.
You have so much knowledge. I love the distinction that you presented, and I actually coach by distinctions: ego versus spirit, expectations versus agreement. I learned that from Steve Chandler. Shout out to Steve Chandler. It's easier for us to, oh, okay, emotion's not bad, but start with logic and then allow emotion to creep in. And I look forward to reading what it is you say, and I'll give the last word to you. And what would you like to tell the? I like this question because the young people are going, look at those guys. They've got to be north of 55, and I'm only 22, and our brains aren't different. They're just newer. So tell the young crowd why, again, logic might be the place to start, and then let emotion creep in.
I think young people are starving for the truth and they want it. I think we've misjudged young people. I think, certainly I have teenagers and I'm like, you guys are the laziest things in the world, but then they amaze me at what they know electronically and other things that they do, right? I'm like, how in the world do you know all that stuff? Then it just makes me more mad because I'm like, well, if you can learn that kind of stuff, then why the hell can't you do this, right? But you talk to people, you just constantly talk, have conversations, but it's not always easy. It's not always easy. You got to navigate the logical and the emotional and choose who you talk to. And then, you know what? You named a few names. Here's what I tell young people all the time: read, read, read.
Yeah.
Then you're not formulating an opinion based on an opinion. You're formulating an idea or a person of who you want to be based on somebody who's been there and done that.
Yep.
And then once you do that, you now have learned the game of life, or the game of craps of life. It's giving you your best odds to be successful. And that's what I listen, I always hear this, and I think it's absolutely true. They say, "Is my God, the world's falling apart. The world's falling apart," right? But here's what I believe. I believe that, you know what, when these kids come into the world, God has a plan and they're adapted to it. They're ready for it. I just think old guys like us, we're just like, hey, let me give you a few extra tips just to kind of put you a little bit further ahead of the game. But they're equipped for it. We're not in dire straits. They'll make it right.
You had me at they're starving for the truth. They want the truth.
Yeah.
And I would completely agree. And they don't want to be lied to. I don't believe they want to be coddled. I believe the parents have decided to coddle them because it makes them feel good. And, I won't go into appeasement, and pleasing is not leadership. But parents, just give your parents or give your kids the truth, and see what else they want from you. And I will die saying this is one of the most important questions you can ask another human being, as a leader, as a parent, is how may I serve you today? What do you really want? Not need from me, but want from me. And I'm not talking about your 3-year-old. I'm talking about your 13 and 19-year-old. And I do it with my son all the time. It gives me great joy when he actually says something that I can actually do for him, and I do it if it's appropriate, of course. And I ask that of leaders to ask their teammates. But I appreciate you, Dr. Mitch. It's been a pleasure having you in my life. Again, shout out to producer Chad for working with you and making your shows look really good. He does the same for me, and but I tell you, he doesn't cut out much, because I believe you would agree, how you say it and when you say it, whether it's coming from a place of accent or not, you're what you say is your truth, and I love that about you.
Yeah, I
Keep
appreciate
on
it.
rocking, Dr. Mitch. I know you have a great thing going. Can't wait to read your stuff. And to anyone else that hasn't heard this already, Dr. Mitch Harlan, he has a beautiful show. It's called True Talks. You can see it on the logo behind him. Look him up. And perhaps you might have a story you want to tell, and he doesn't know how to get a hold of you. So why don't you get a hold of him and say, I believe my story, Dr. Mitch, might be of importance or some sort of help for your audience. And I'm sure you would at least listen to him or her. So
We love it. Yes, right in. We'll call you. We'll talk to you, and if it's something that fits our agenda, we will put it on the show. We love it.
beautiful. Appreciate your time. Have a great day. Go out and continue doing what you're doing. And for all those listening, if you're in an emotional state and you can't get out of it, ask yourself, where is this coming from? Try and get more logical. Ask for help. Raise your hand, leaders. Gee, Merry Christmas. It's not going to kill you to be a human being. But I hope you have taken something away from this conversation with Dr. Mitch, as I had. Go out and love someone. Be kind. Be empathetic. Please continue to be curious. You might just find out something you didn't know before, and go out and serve someone. Amen.